Science fiction indeed. This is the front page, the title page of Neil Stephenson's Snowcrash. Snowcrash was written in 1992. It is on the Time list of the best 100 novels of all time. This story is about, it happens a little bit in the future. We are in a society where all nation states have collapsed. It's private companies running the states, and they are aligned with each other. And it's the story of Hiro protagonist and his girlfriend YT. Now, YT leaves him later on, actually, in the novel. I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't read the novel, but he leaves and joins Hiro protagonist arch enemy in the novel. But that's not the reason why I'm mentioning it. The term metaverse was created in this novel. Amazing that you in 1992 can be so visionary to foresee something like the metaverse. And it means in the novel beyond the universe. And in the novel, on top of the physical world, there is a completely immersive, comprehensive digital world where you can move fluently from the physical world into this digital world. That novel is a lot about language, and Neil Stephenson says a speech with magical force. And the language of the metaverse is the language of computer code. Everything is computer code in the language of the metaverse. This is from a picture from a report from the EUIPO. I will give you a little bit more information at the very end if you want to read more from this report. But basically, in this technology report, like, we are provoking the question, imagine a future where the physical and the virtual worlds merge, where surroundings are supplemented with virtual layers, enabling experiences and interactions and human interactions in completely new ways. Now, the internet has gone through different stages, and you can say the first iteration of the internet was Web 1.0. And that was basically just looking at a flat screen. The first computers were, it was these black screens with green letters on top of them. But it was, the internet was accessing information. So for many years, the internet was a kind of library where you can just read text. There was even, for many, many years, not even photos or videos or sound like we have that came later on, but the Web 1.0 was just accessing, passively accessing information. That wasn't really very popular in the general population, and you could say that it was a little bit for specialists. Also, going to the internet in the beginning, you need to be able to code a little bit, actually. But that changed with Web 2.0, because in 2.0, we began to interact with each other. And of course, social media, messaging applications, and others are the ultimate symbol of that, where we started engaging with each other. And then slowly, popular appeal of the internet grew. And today, well, certainly in Europe, everybody is an internet user. For the rest of the world, that might not fully be the case yet, but it is going in that way. We've talked several times in this seminar about Web 3.0, which is the age of decentralization of the internet. We have seen the rise of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, non-fungible tokens, and all the other developments that we have already discussed and you are familiar with. And that's Web 3.0. And that's kind of where we are today in this Web 3.0, trying to adapt to that technology. And then Web 4.0, the immersive internet, where everything integrates into a human experience that goes far beyond what the internet has been able to present before that. This is still probably the best book written about the metaverse. I'm gonna just quote from the book here because I think it kind of describes metaverse very well. A massively scaled and interoperable network of real-time rendered 3D virtual worlds that can be experienced synchronously and persistently by an effectively unlimited number of users with an individual sense of presence and with continuity of data such as identity, history, entitlements, objects, communications, and payments. Matthew Ball said at one point, in addition to this, where metaverse revolutionizes internet is the fact that for the first time in internet history, you are able to engage in a virtual world where humans are using the senses, all of our senses, that we have been able to explore the world with since the creation of humankind. We are looking at the world in 3D. We are listening to the world. We feel the world. We smell the world. These are the senses that we have, and we have used those. Looking at a flat screen or a mobile device is not a natural way for humans to explore the world. For the first time with the metaverse, it gives the promise of a digital experience, but using human senses. Are we there yet? No, absolutely not. And I can recommend this report here about at what stage are we in the development of the metaverse. And we are very, very early days in this development. We are seeing an emergence now. The technological demands on that are enormous and are definitely not met yet. But over the next few years, we will see an advancement of that. And then now it's projected in the report around 2030, we will see something more mature metaverse. Whether that is realistic or not, I'm not able to predict that. But we are technologically in the very, very early stages. Now we have what we could call metaverses. So for the purpose of this presentation, I use the metaverse as the term for the ecosystem and the different iterations of that ecosystem. But each of the virtual worlds that we today consider to be part of the metaverse, in this report, they're called metaverses. And they're kind of like individual metaspaces that is pointing the way to the real metaverse, but us also only doing that. To get the real metaverse running, a lot of technologies needs to work together. We need much, much faster internet, and we are getting 5G, and it's really fast, but it's not fast enough. And it doesn't have capacity enough. And around 2030, we will have 6G, and that will be probably a much, much larger leap in speed and capacity of the internet. We need development in augmented reality tools. The decentralized blockchain solutions and NFTs need to develop. Internet of Things need to develop. A lot of things technologically need to develop to get this full metaverse experience where there is a full convergence between the physical and the virtual reality. In the report, it is said that the metaverse can develop in 4 different directions. Are we going to a more open metaverse or a more proprietary metaverse? Are we going for a convergent or a separate metaverse? And the report foresees that we can go to the completely free immersive metaverse. This is the metaverse of Neil Stephenson's novel. We can also go to the nerdverse, and we have to be honest, metaverse today are mainly for nerds, gaming enthusiasts, people with special interests, people that are willing to invest substantial amounts of money and equipment to be that. And one future of the metaverse will be that it never moves out of this nerdverse. It will still be important, but it will not get that complete popular acceptance as we have seen with social media. Or we can have the metaverses forever, lots of separate worlds that are really not interconnected, where you cannot move fluently through those different metaverses, through these different virtual realities, where ownership of items are isolated to that specific world, and where you cannot take a piece of property from one and move fluently to the others, but many more metaverses. And that could be a future of the metaverse. It's a big ecosystem. It is a big variety of platforms, but true interconnectivity is not achieved. And the last could be one metaverse to rule them all, basically one standard, one metaverse becomes so trend-setting that it starts dominating the rest. This is probably the version of the metaverse most people would at all costs try to avoid. These kinds of total dominance of a single company or proprietor are usually things that is not very sought after and very and a very popular option for this. But I think there is absolutely a point in the report that metaverse can go in these different directions. I will go a little science fiction here and say what after the metaverse, the multiverse, where basically humans can have parallel experiences at the same time. This sounds complete science fiction. It's not. It's absolutely realistic with the development in quantum technologies. This is not unrealistic. If you want to know more about it, there is a fantastic television series on Netflix called The OA. Unfortunately, only 2 seasons, one of the greatest television series ever made, but only 2 seasons. There's a fantastic cliffhanger at the end of season 2, but season 3 was never made. I can still recommend it. And if you want to know what the multiverse is, watch The OA. Well, back to reality. What is the metaverse? The metaverse have different layers. There is a technology layer. Of course, we need infrastructure, a lot of hardware to make the metaverse run. We need interfaces. We need something where the human senses can interact with the virtuality of the metaverse. And that requires spatial computing. Spatial computing, one of the fastest growing area of computing in computing science, together with cryptography and others. So we have these 3 technology layers that have to be in place. And then we have the interaction layer, the content of the metaverse, how to discover the metaverse, and then the experience itself. This is where we humans come into play when we go into the metaverse and interact, whether it's commercial or private interactions. And there's intellectual property all over this, as is not surprising because there's intellectual property in everything in human life. And we will have a lot of crypto. We will have a lot of non-fungible tokens. It will be a crypto and non-fungible token economy, again, running across all of these 6 layers of the metaverse. Already now, lots of IP in the metaverse. I'm going to go quickly over this, quite self-evident. Copyright and designs. These are 4 of the most popular parts of the metaverse. They're metaverses. They are isolated virtual realities, but definitely pointing some of the trends that we could see for a true metaverse. And already, of course, lots of copyright and design in those kinds of worlds. Lots of patents. The patents for different kinds of hardware for us to engage, interact with the virtual reality. That will be more and more advanced as we move along. Cryptography, this is a patent that was taken out by Nike for a kind of digital representation of sneakers, and there's a lot of cryptography in that, and that they obtained a patent for this invention. We already heard, we talked about it last year as well at the seminar about how filings for non-fungible tokens related items have like skyrocketed in the trademark field. and that have led to, of course, an update of the NIS classifications in class 9, and it has led to changes, for instance, in the EUIPO trademark guidelines about how to treat these downloadable goods, virtual goods, representations of virtual goods. And we saw this update of the latest version of the NIS classification. This is really business as usual. We always have, when new technologies come up, of course, the IP world looks forward to this new development coming along and adapts to that. That's kind of business as usual. There's a good article in a recent WIPO magazine, and it's encouraging, of course, brand owners. Brand owners have to be aware of this new development, of course, because you need to see where is your role in the metaverse. What's going to be your IP strategy here? I've heard from talks with many small and medium-sized companies that they're beginning to realize that the metaverse is an area where they will need to set up an IP strategy, including a trademark strategy. And that strategy, of course, has all these elements. Of course, bad actors are coming into the space as well, and disputes are rising already in this space. We've seen bad faith registrations, famous brands, but registered bad actors are trying to take advantage of this new technology, and maybe a low level of awareness amongst certain companies. And those, of course, those disputes are not new at all, but of course, companies have to be aware of it. And we are seeing disputes and conflicts coming to the court systems already. There's been a long-going dispute between Nike and Stocks as second-hand retailer or marketplace, and they were at one point, for instance, creating a Nike non-fungible tokens representing Nike shoes, and there was a court case about that. But there are several court cases ongoing between Nike and Stocks here, and of course the metaverse starts going into that as well. And we've seen, I think, the Birkin bag with this non-fungible representation of the Birkin bag is probably the most well-known dispute that we have seen up until now. And that's, of course, that's only going to be the beginning, because as something grows of importance, the number of IP disputes rises. I think we also see a trend now of meta-washing. Things are more metaverse than maybe they really are. Maybe it's really old wine on new bottles, and these kinds of dispute can be more in the area of misleading marketing and other things. But we're seeing this kind of, like we have it in environmental field, we greenwashing. We definitely also see things are sold more metaverse than maybe they are. Looking at the area of infringement and enforcement, I'll try to come with a few pointers of where I see the potential future in the 4 variations of the metaverse, or the 4 directions the metaverse could go according to this scientific report that I mentioned before. If we take the least likely future version of the metaverse, the one where one metaverse rules it all, and definitely a version most people and policymakers probably would try to avoid it at all times. I think the impact, well, economically, it could be quite substantial, but how will consumers react to a world like this? And probably there's a tendency today that internet users like to move from one platform to the other. They like to have freedom in the sense of how would consumers react to a metaverse like that? The environmental impact could of course be powerful. I think for IP protection, it would not create any major problems. It would probably be a metaverse that would be very well managed and easy to manage. If it's becoming popular, it would create massive IP infringement. But that would be more due to the fact that when economy goes to a certain new technological platform, infringement comes along. But on the other hand, the fact that one metaverse rules them all, IP enforcement measures would probably also be highly effective. So we would see a high level of infringement, but also a high and easy access to effective enforcement measures. However, this is probably the least likely direction the metaverse can go, and I doubt very much that will be the direction. I think a more likely future metaverse will be the one where the metaverse is like today, limited, isolated worlds with limited interaction. But of course, growing, because the number of metaverses will grow, the quality of those metaverses will grow. What will be the economic impact of that? That's very, very difficult to say. But maybe the competition situation between those metaverses will mean that there might be a lot of activity, but maybe the economic turnover will not be so big. The environmental impact on this world, I would say, could be quite doubtful. It could have a positive environmental effect in the sense that human activities that today emits carbon that could go into these kinds of metaverses. But again, will consumers be happy in a situation where they cannot freely move their assets between the worlds? Will you go and invest a large amount of money in a piece of property if you can only get visitors to your property if they are in that world? And there are some things here where it becomes doubtful what the economic and environmental impact of it will be. And IP protection very divergent, because there would be metaverses that would adapt extremely fluently to the current IP system, and others that would try to avoid it, try to go against IP protection. So that could be a very divergent picture of the level of IP protection. Again, dependent on how the economic development would go, IP infringement has a tendency to go where the money is. So if economic impact of these metaverses forever is limited, of course, IP infringement would be limited. And I think, again, a very divergent picture of IP enforcement measures, varying from metaverse to metaverse. The nerdverse, basically the idea that the metaverse will be for people with special interest, people that are willing to do an extra investment in technology and really go into this experience. But the idea here between the nerdverse is it doesn't reach the popular reach that we have in social media platforms that we have seen, where everybody connects. Is it attractive? I'm always using my wife as picture of future trends, and definitely my wife is not gonna wear headsets to communicate online. She's not gonna do anything that requires her to make a setup, to adapt, to calibrate equipment. She's not gonna do that. She wants something. She presses the button and it works. And if that's not the way the metaverse goes, people like my wife will never go, and I think she represents a large proportion of the world population. Economically, the nerdverse will be insignificant. The environmental impact will be minimal, and IP infringement will be an insignificant phenomenon. However, IP protection. IP will be a fringe phenomenon with low level of respect. For IP infringement, the infringement that happened in the nerdverse is intense, but they're limited. This could be a kind of dark web. What you see in the dark web, there's not that much direct IP infringement, but there's a lot of tools developed for IP infringements, a lot of communication between IP criminals, between IP infringers that happens in the dark web. And the nerdverse could be a little bit the same. You prepare what you do illegally other places. You could do that in the nerdverse, but you wouldn't carry it out so much in the nerdverse because the number of users in the nerdverse will be limited and you are not reaching the broader population. That's the third way the metaverse can develop. And then, of course, the last one, the one where we are talking Web 4.0, where we are talking Neil Stephenson's version, the one where we have this immersive metaverse, where you can move between the different subworlds in the metaverse, and you can bring your property with you, and you can bring your identity with you, and you can engage fluently. Supported by all other kinds of technology, you can speak your language, and everybody can understand what you're saying because the AI will automatically translate everything, and you can pay in any currency you want because that will be automatically exchanged, and that kind of world. The economic impact could be substantial, but again, I'm asking, how will consumers react? Will consumers go out and buy very expensive items that cost almost nothing to produce because they're virtual? Like, what will be the consequences? Environmentally, this could potentially be very significant. Why go on vacation when you can have a much greater vacation in the metaverse? And so the environmental impact could be significant. IP protection, IP will be more important than ever in a world like this, and for commercialization of whatever services are being presented in such a world. IP infringement will be massive, and there'll be lots of challenges and opportunities for IP enforcement. And let me just here, drawing a little bit to the end, just line up a list of some of what would be the challenges and opportunities in such an immersive metaverse. Jurisdiction is always the problem. What law applies? Which court is the one that can adjudicate the case? Which government can enforce a decision? It's not, I'm not saying it's fundamentally different than what you have in the internet. It's probably a little bit the same, but just the size of it and this way that you can automatically adapt to anywhere you are in the metaverse, of course, it raises jurisdictional questions and closely linked, of course, to the territoriality of intellectual property. It could raise the super interesting question, like the role between registered and unregistered IP, and the whole trade secret area will be super relevant in an area like the metaverse. What is localization in the metaverse? Closely linked to the first questions here. We look a lot when we are looking about infringing acts of causality. Where was a person located doing the infringement? Where did the infringement have effect? What was the accessibility? Which market was targeted? These kinds of concepts will still apply in the metaverse, but of course be challenged, because where are you targeting if there are no languages in the metaverse? All languages at the same time, all currencies at the same time. There are different topics here, of course, that will be super interesting to see. And then who is the intermediary? Today, enforcement relies, whether it's civil, administrative, or criminal enforcement, relies a lot on the intermediary. You go to the intermediary, they can do different things. They can do it voluntarily. They can be obligated to do it. But where do we find that intermediary? We are having legislative initiatives. We have the Digital Services Act that a lot deals with, you know, the liability and the responsibilities of the internet intermediary. How will that work in a metaverse? We are seeing cryptocurrency legislation in more and more countries that is very diverse, very different legislative approaches to this. How will it be in the metaverse? And then, of course, Web3 is decentralized web, crypto economy, and automated organizations that is running services, but without very little human interaction or human involvement. You know, like how will that impact IP infringement and enforcement in the metaverse? I mentioned artificial intelligence. Again, Metaverse is not a technology. Metaverse is a platform that runs on technologies, and AI will be a very, very strong technology in the Metaverse that can adapt to the complete user-adapted content. So you can go to the same, three people can go to the same experience in the Metaverse, and they're experiencing something completely different, because that experience, the service that is rendered, might be experienced completely different by the user that goes into that experience due to AI. So it's everything is adapted to the individual. What will be the impact of that? Now, having been a prosecutor for many years, worked with IP law, virtual justice. How do we retain and secure evidence in the metaverse? Here you have to remember the data amounts in the metaverse will be many, 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 many times higher than the data amounts on the surface web that we have today, or the internet that we have today. Like, how do you replicate? How do you present evidence? How do you retain evidence in a world like this? Everything has to be instantaneous. How will that be? How will law enforcement be in the metaverse? How can law enforcement move in the metaverse? How do we get court orders to search places in the metaverse, arrest avatars? It's that, yeah, of course, this is completely up in the air, but I'm just mentioning some of these opportunities and challenges that the metaverse will pose. Read more. There came a report a few weeks ago, I think, from WIPO. It looks a lot on the jurisdictional challenge, localization of IP infringement in the online environment. I've taken a couple of points from the report already. This is the report from EUIPO I mentioned just before. And we have launched a study now specifically in infringement and enforcement of IP in the metaverse that will come next year, where we will follow up. But already now we have looked at a lot of technologies, and I'm just promoting this report. And a lot of these technologies, they are foundational technologies of the metaverse. Spatial computing, I mentioned AI, 5 and 6G mobile networking, just to mention a few examples of that, blockchain and Internet of Things. I like to see things not only technologically, legally, but also economically, social, and environmentally, because we have to take the environmental aspects into consideration. Just thinking about the warmest summer in human history, or at least in the time, not in human history, but in the time that temperatures have been monitored. So this is something to take very serious as well. And we try to analyze, of course, the misuse of IP in relation to new technological development, but also the use that can be used for legitimate purposes. And as I said, the environmental impact. I'm going to stop here. I'm very sorry I couldn't discuss with you. I think this would be a great, it's always a great discussion over the dinner table, these kinds of developments. And I'm sure we could have had a lot of fun discussing that. Maybe we can do that next year at your conference. I'm sure we can find other interesting topics to discuss. I hope you enjoyed this technological science fiction walkthrough before lunch, and I wish you a great seminar. I'm sure it's going to be a great seminar. It's already great, and that you enjoy your interaction with each other, and hopefully see you sometime in the future. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Thank you.